On the 8th of July, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a very important press release. It was the most important press release of the century, and the headlines read things like Army declares flying disc found, and Army finds air saucer on ranch in New Mexico. And they claimed that they found a crashed flying saucer on a sheep ranch near Corona, which is like 120 kilometers from Roswell. And
Why
later
have
that
they?
same,
They've never made Corona famous. They made Roswell famous.
yeah, I think it's because it's Roswell. It's the Roswell airfield. So that it was reported from. So, but here's the thing, right? So they reported this, and then later that same day, they denied it. And
yeah, that's stupid, isn't it?
and then
We got it
it
wrong.
wasn't. Well, yeah, just totally denied it. And then, but this, I mean, this just shows sign of the times. They didn't even talk about it again for another 30 years.
Oh my God. What is it?
And
They've said, we found a crashed flying saucer. No, we haven't. But you said you did. I didn't. I didn't.
Well,
I didn't say that. You
that's
did.
what they do now. I didn't.
I didn't. I made a mistake.
Prove it. Prove I said it.
Didn't
No,
they say it was a... Oh, no, it wasn't. It was just a weather balloon.
yeah, well, that's the usual tale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, so in 1978, nuclear physicist, guy called Stanton Friedman, met a television station manager in Louisiana while he was waiting to be interviewed about his work on UFOs. And the station manager directed him to a man called Jesse Marcel, who apparently handled pieces of a flying saucer when he was in the military. So this Jesse Marcel had been the intelligence officer at the Roswell, what's it called? Roswell Army Airfield in 1947 when the flying saucer was supposed to have crashed. So in 1947, it was like all headlines, and then later that day, oh no, it was a mistake. Nah, nothing happened really. And then it wasn't until 1978 somebody who was, getting interviewed about UFOs was kind of introduced to this guy, and then Friedman partnered with ufologist William Moore to give the events like a time frame, and that's when they found newspapers from 1947. They found them all at the University of Minnesota library, and that's what covered they called it the Corona Roswell event. And the paper gives like names for the rancher, the sheriff, the Royal Air Force personnel, and like the time frame and everything. So two years later, it wasn't until like 1980 that Friedman and Moore met with a guy called Lieutenant Hort, and he shared a base yearbook with them, and they talked to 62 people concerned with the event in the end, including a guy called Bill Brazel, and he was the son of the rancher. This is getting complicated, but he was the son of the rancher who found the wreckage, and then there was others as well who handled debris, such as like someone called Loretta Proctor, and Jesse Marcel's son, who was called Jesse Jr. But so by 1986, it's taken a while.
That's a while, isn't it? So it happened in 1947. Then 1986, they start looking into it a bit more.
It was 1978, they started looking into it more. And then by 1986, so 8 years later, Friedman and Moore had spoken to like 92 people, and they'd also published like 6 papers. And they did a TV show about Roswell. Apparently that TV show enabled them to find other witnesses as well. So again, 3 years after that, 1989, while filming in Roswell, Friedman met with mortician Glenn Dennis, and he'd worked for the Ballard Funeral Home, which provided like mortuary services to the base.
Why did they need a mortuary?
Oh, well, Dennis spoke about like strange activity that he'd witnessed at the Army Base Hospital in 1947, and he said that the public had just gone through a world war, and news of flying saucer would have been too much to deal with. So that was kind of his, reason why the story didn't go anywhere, because like sounds like press collusion to me. But they just they just decided that that the people don't want to hear this. It's not something that we want to worry them with. But this mortician, Glenn Dennis, believes that alien bodies were recovered in the crash, and he claimed to have met with a nurse at the base. This is all kind of hearsay in a way, isn't it? But he claimed to have met with a nurse at the base who told him about very smelly bodies. Nothing to do with Dharma, but very smelly bodies should seen being autopsied by two doctors, and she reckons that the bodies had been like a brownish grey skin, no hair, big heads with slits or holes for the nose, ears, and mouth, and 4 slender fingers with no thumb.
Oh.
And after meeting with Dennis a few times, the nurse apparently moved to England. But when when Friedman tried to contact her, oh no, sorry, when Dennis tried to contact her again after she moved to England, Dennis's mail was returned, stamped deceased.
Oh, that's a conspiracy.
That is, yeah.
Spooky.
So I know, but despite some of the unverifiable details of the crash, the broadcast of Unsolved Mysteries in September 1989 was a great success. It has been seen by like 28 million people in the US, followed by like a rush of books and TV shows, and attacks by debunkers. There's always debunkers, isn't there?
Yeah, I became quite obsessed, remembering through the 90s. I was like, oh my God, Roswell. And it was getting a load of traction at the time because of the 50 years secrecy thing was coming up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is the funny thing, right? So they like debunkers, and there seems to be like two sort of tribes of people. Like we're talking about like the 90s here, but there was like researchers who agreed that at least one UFO had crashed on the sheep ranch, and then the other group of researchers, which included like Friedman, believed that there had been a second crash on the plains of San Augustine, New Mexico. So everybody like looking into this, researching it, they actually definitely believe there was a crash, but some of them believe that there was another one as well. And the second crash
collided.
Well, I don't know about two colliding, but you never know. But the second crash theory relies on the testimony of there was 2 key witnesses, a guy called Gerald Anderson and a guy called Grady Barnett, who they called Barney for some reason. And Gerald Anderson had contacted Friedman after seeing the 1990 rerun of Unsolved Mysteries documentary. Barnett has died, but he told the story to 2 of his friends. And independently, these 2 friends, both without being together, talking to each other, relayed the Barnett story of alien bodies in or around saucer debris. And according to Anderson, one of the aliens survived the crash as well. I mean, there's a lot of ufologists who express like reservations about the crash at San Augustine, but Barnett, he was dead, so he couldn't really be questioned about what he'd seen or anything. But the facts surrounding the Corona crash, however, have become almost universally accepted. Really,
I have to say though that it's like the worst cover-up ever. It's like, just like, yeah, it's still spoken about now. So if it has happened, they've tried to cover it up. Everyone knows about it.
Yeah, but of course later that day when they said that it didn't happen, then there you go, it didn't.
Well, I remember that I was really into it in the 90s, and they said they've got that lost footage of the alien autopsies, and they've released it, and everyone's watching it, and then they started to pull that apart, saying, "Oh, look, you can see he's wearing a digital watch or stuff like that, or they never used that film technology back then, and you can see this or that there." And they debunked it, and it's like, And then someone said, "Yeah, we made this fake alien autopsy video," and then that kind of had the effect of, I remember thinking, "Ah, so it was all a load of nonsense anyway." And then I moved on from Roswell. So maybe it had the
Yeah.
desired effect, like to shut people up, give an
Yeah.
obvious hoax that they think, "Oh, this is real," then take away the show that it was fake, and then that's just made everyone lose interest in Roswell for a long time.
Yeah.
No one talks about it now except for us.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Things are starting to come back. I mean, they had a hearing a few months ago. That it was earlier this year, where they released. They talked about UFOs that have been caught on camera, and a lot more information about UFOs has been released to the public, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But
Oh,
but
there's
let me
but
just.
it's all vague stuff like, oh, there's definitely something weird flying in the air there. It's never like
Yeah.
something. Oh, yeah, that's definitely. It's always open to interpretations, and
Yeah.
oh, well, it could have just been that, or it could have been. It's like with ghost sightings. It's never conclusive enough.
Well, Kev, let me tell you about the actual, like, the whole story of Roswell, right? Um because it's actually interesting, right? Uh, the crash. So the story about the Roswell crash, it actually began on the 2nd of July, 1947. So there's a bit of a delay between when it was reported in the papers, but 2nd of July, when there's a sheep rancher, Mac Brazel, he heard like an explosion in the middle of an electrical storm, and the following morning, uh, he he went out to check on a water pump, and on the way, he discovered debris scattered across like a kilometer long area, and he found this debris, and he could fold the metallic bits several times, and it would like unfold spontaneously.
Yeah.
There were also pieces that of what was described as I beams with very like unusual light purple colored symbols along the inside. And that reminds me of like a X-Files episode where I'm pretty sure it was on a beach where there was it looked like a crashed aircraft with a lot of symbols on it. I can't remember what season that was, but the beams had like apparently like the weight of uh like balsa wood, like hobby wood, so sort of light.
Yeah.
But couldn't be broken or
Okay.
even burned. I don't know, like did you get a blowtorch out? But
But
on
something must have
Sun,
broken it if it's got debris everywhere.
well, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point, isn't it? You've got something that apparently can't be broken or
But it's
bent, and
been
yet
broken.
it's in bits.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that things like that is inconsistent. Unless he had no tool that could break it. It was an explosion from within reactors or something. I don't know.
mm.
Obviously, you
And
can't snap it. He's saying. I'm guessing.
yeah, he just folded it up, and it all just bounced back out in the way it was. But so then, a couple of days later, on Sunday, the 6th of July, this guy Brazel, he transported the wreckage in his pickup truck to the Roswell sheriff, who was called George Wilcox. So the sheriff contacted the army base, and he spoke with that Major Marcel, and he was the Roswell. Oh no, sorry, no, he was the intelligence officer. And then he spoke with the base commander, um, and he was told to follow the rancher out and collect the rest of the debris. So
So
him and another colleague went out, had a look at it, and Marcel surmised, judging by the wreckage, that something exploded above the ground while traveling at high speed, and he was familiar with air activities. He stated that it was not a weather balloon, nor was it a plane or a missile.
yeah, because they said it was
Um,
a weather balloon afterwards, didn't they? I think they tried to say
yeah,
it was just a weather balloon that had gone up, and it was like a
yeah,
silver foil weather balloon. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't be like thinking I'm going to take this into the sheriff just to show him what I've got here. You'd be thinking, what is? It's
yeah,
obviously something piqued his curiosity, and he's thinking this isn't right.
yeah. But this is the thing, though, Kev. So there are pictures of this of him looking at this material,
Yeah,
and
I've
it
seen
does,
that one. It's a famous
yeah,
picture. Yeah,
but it does kind of look like foil, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. It does look
And
like
and it
foil. Yeah,
and it's in pieces. So I mean, you're quite right as well. It's in pieces. Like apparently you couldn't break it, snap it, or anything, but it's in bits. So it is a little bit suspect. But they took as much of the debris as they could, and apparently they left a lot of it behind as well. But they took it back to Roswell base. But Marcel stopped off at home to show his wife and his son, so all of a sudden they became witnesses as well to it. But the next morning, Colonel Blanchard ordered the area near Corona to be sealed off, and
exactly.
a large group
Why? If it's just something innocent, why has he done that?
Exactly. A large group of, I mean, well, it could be anything because it's just after the war. You know what I mean? They're thinking, is it?
Soviet.
I think, well, yeah, exactly, because that was also building up as well, wasn't it? So, a large group of the soldiers and military went off, and they did like a detailed search of the area, and they issued a press release. They issued the press release at noon, indicating that a flying disc had been captured. However, because of the time differences in the US, it was too late for most morning papers, except the last edition of Los Angeles Herald Express. So they sent this press release out like USA wide.
Yeah, like why?
I think, but the local newspapers were inundated with queries from the media and the public, and that so that Marcel was taught to take the wreckage to Wright Airfield, which is known as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, where the U.S. Army like stockpile captured enemy equipment. And on the way, he stopped at Fort Worth, Texas headquarters. He seems to do a lot of stop-offs actually. This Marcel, he's like, yeah, I'll just stop here and show some people. Yeah, look at this I found.
For information, I'll just stop off here and show them that.
Yeah. And by this point though, the Air Force were getting a little bit worried, I think, and it was like while he was traveling, taking this stuff to the Wright Field. It's called Wright Field, as in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The acting director of Strategic Air Command in Washington, a guy called General Clemens McCullen, he contacted the chief of staff at Fort Worth and said, create a cover story. Hand over the running of the incident to this guy called General Roger Ramey, and he's the base commander. So they were getting a little bit worried about this story now, and they're like, right, create a cover story, sort this out. Even though they'd sent out a press release. I mean,
yeah, it's a bit late now. A cover story.
Yeah,
you sent all the press releases.
Yeah,
it's like saying, they just like made a mistake, and this is the real. It's making the first people look stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they were stupid.
Maybe, or maybe not.
Yeah, he's done damage control imitation. Oh my God, we've got to get some cover story out.
Yeah. So when Marcel arrived at Fort Worth, weather balloon wreckage and a radar reflector made of foil and wooden sticks was brought in by someone else, the base meteorologist, a guy called Irving Newton, and this explains the images, because Marcel posed with this bogus wreckage, and then the press were informed that a mistake had been made. It wasn't a flying saucer, but just a radar reflector. And Ramey, remember General Roger Ramey, who was told to take over this whole operation, he told Marcel not to say anything, and he was sent back to Roswell. And the cover story went out at 5 p.m. Central Time. So the next day, headlines read, reports of flying saucers dwindle. New Mexico disc is only a weather balloon. So,
the thing is, I've just brought up the picture now that you've been saying about. It does look like a bunch of silver foil that's sellotaped to a wire frame.
Yeah. So this is what they're saying now, is that the reason for those pictures is because it was just all a setup. The actual material that he collected isn't
nothing like that.
Those...
Yeah, because I'm looking at it now. That's just foil he's holding up from a balloon that's got shattered. Oh, so this wasn't the one that I'm looking at now. with Major Marcel with debris.
Uh-huh.
You reckon that's what they've done afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's clearly a weather balloon.
Yeah.
It's just like a load of. Yeah, because then you're going to see that and think, oh, is that it?